Hello, good morning. I'm your host, Angela Ahimsa, and you've tuned in to Feed Your Chakras, which is a broadcasting live and streaming globally from Just TV, Roku, Meta, and the NCG television network. Today's guest is a very special friend of mine. His name is Dr. Carlos Florez, and he is a neurologist, a healer, and a visionary whose journey spans the realms of Western medicine, ancient wisdom, and awakened consciousness. He was born in Colombia and guided by ancestral wisdom in El Pueblo, Pasto, and Carlos brings a rare fusion of neuroscience, soul, and spirit. And his work dives deep into the nature of healing, from neuroplasticity to telomeres to energy, intuition, and altered states of consciousness. So in this conversation, we're going to explore how trauma lives in the nervous system, how ancestral memory is carried in the body, and how true healing begins when we reconnect with our spirit. So let's drop it in. Thank you so much, Carlos, for being here today. It's an honor.
Oh my God, it's an immense honor for you to have me here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. This is, by the way, the first time that I'm able to share some of these ideas, and happy to speak my truth.
Beautiful. Speak it loud.
I will.
Okay, so let's just dive in. As I mentioned, he's a neurologist. So he spent years immersed in Western medicine and neuroscience. We'd call him a neuroscience expert. But your story took a very unexpected turn. Can you take us back to where that pivot point was in your life and when your worldview began to shift?
It's very important for me to say that I think that the whole path has something to do with what I am actually becoming. So when my story started to shift or to change, or how many times it had changed, or how many times actually had becoming, is very difficult to establish. Okay, there are many points in my life in which I had to follow my intuition. To come off from my own childhood traumas, becoming successful at certain things in this three-dimensional, world, and also trying to come back home to my real essence. So I will say that if you want me specifically to say when I decided that I had to come back home, then that would be probably when I was doing research in neuroscience, and I realized the difference between the information carried by the human brain and the difference between that information that is able, each one of the cells in the human brain is able to carry, a comparison with very similar structural cells in other animals, in rodents, for example, but the information carried by the human brain was impressive. I'm not saying that we are more or less than animals. I'm just saying that that particular experience during research allowed me to kind of start thinking that there was something beyond, that I was not going to be able to explain it with neuroscience.
Okay, wow. All right, so I've known Carlos probably, I think, 9 years, and I've definitely seen his evolution towards becoming more leaning towards or integrative of his traditional and ancestral roots. So it's really beautiful to experience your journey just from what I've seen. What was it like for you, as someone who was trained in Western medicine and clinical systems, to begin opening up to these ideas that weren't traditionally taught in med school? Because I remember you referencing some of the books that you had to read, and you just thought it was complete like woo-woo. And now you're actually realizing how important it actually is.
Well, there are moments in the evolution of a person in which you start taking bits, kind of annotations in your essence allows you to actually take bits of that information to start shifting, to start changing. So I'm not saying that the scientific books didn't give me something. They gave me a lot of opportunities and possibilities, and I'm still actually very linked to science. And when I realized that science is not going to give me the answers that at the end of the day, every human like me, you, every human is actually looking for, then I started actually looking for them somewhere else. So my heart actually said at some point that is, non-scientific or voodoo or, like non, let's say, not as rigid as I would in past versions of me, would have actually accepted. And that was simply because at that moment, I was not yet taking the information that I needed to take because I was not in the situation where I was ready to take it. Now I understand that every single type of information is important because all that is actually leading to my human experience and to the purpose that I'm actually came to this world to fulfill. And it's very similar to the purpose of every human, which is collect information to come back home.
Okay. Thank you. So you once told me that you used to be an atheist and that I actually helped spark something in you during that time. Would you be open to sharing a little more about that?
Well, from the perspective of what most people think of God, I believe exactly the same.
Okay.
God is not...
Just explain it, because...
Yeah, well, most people believe that God is kind of an entity, a person or something like humanoid, like that is up there, defining everything and determining everything for us. That's not what I believe is... that's the reason why I don't like to use the word God. Like, yes, there is a superior, let's say, source
energy,
of everything. There is a source of everything. That source of everything, we are just giving them information, giving that source of everything the information to continue creation. So there are many theories of how actually everything in the universe is created, right? So there is the quantum theories and the field theories and the string theories, the plasma theory, all those theories that actually try to explain how everything is created and united. In my opinion, the important part is that science and metaphysical sciences and even the ancestral wisdom is telling us that there is a source, okay, that is actually collecting information, that is improving itself. That's called creation. Is creating at all times. And my point of view is that we are kind of a spice of that source, collecting information
of the source,
collecting information
of life.
Exactly. Well, it's like we are, every single cell of us is collecting information,
okay,
and sending it back to continue creation. At this level, at the three-dimensional level, the universe level, but that is only one level.
That's not
That
the universe level, but that's the level that we're existing in.
yes, that's the only one level. That is only one level.
Yes.
You know, there are other levels
Mm-hmm.
beyond the universe that we are actually experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and that source actually exists in the way of improving itself all the time. You know, thanks to us, thanks to every single one of us, thanks to all the things, good and bad. Okay, thanks to everything, thanks to the duality, and in this three-dimensional state, we're basically following the rules of the duality. Okay, following the rules of information, and maybe other universes also created by the same source is actually following different rules that is allowing the source to continue created. That's the reason why the physicists now are saying that there is the possibility for multidimensional universes. And that actually is not actually away from what ancient wisdom was saying, you know, and that's the reason why there is no reason for us to be critical of so many things or cynics of so many things. You know, what we need to be is basically the best collectors of information, living the best experience we can, the best life we can, with the highest, you know, possibility that we can in this 3 dimension to share our experience. And the best way to share is, yes, and the best way for sharing it is through love, through compassion, through collaboration, through all the good things that we know that are essential for our existence to be better. So as simple as that. And that has nothing against science, neither anything against religion, nor against traditional knowledge. It integrates everything.
Beautiful. Okay. So what was your first mystical experience that shifted your perception of the brain or body or even your consciousness?
The first one?
Yes.
I think I had it in my childhood.
Okay.
You can call it mystical. I don't know. I remember once actually coming up from a dream saying to my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, that in my dreams I was able to solve very complicated equations that I didn't know what they meant. I think science in some ways is mystical as well.
I think that science, spirituality, and art are actually all the same thing, and it's only been separated as a means to disillusion us.
Exactly, and we don't own any of those. They come through us.
Yes.
They come through us
in our expression of truth.
Yes, and we somehow create these engrams in our brain, saying that we own that.
That's the ego.
So I think that told me that particular experience told me that something was, you know, like beyond my body, because I knew things that there was no way that I knew. So, but my grandmother dismissed it. And then
surprising, because you come from a tribe who's very into.
Well, my grandmother from my paternal side does not come from that. From all right. That was a different. That was a, and I yes, my grandmother from my grandparents from my mother's side came from a tribe, and then but my grandmother she just dismissed it, and that was kind of a change, because then I dismissed it immediately. I dismissed it. It was not until
Yeah. It's interesting, because I actually just shared something the other day. I had Dee Dee Verg, who's the quantum hypnotist, on my show. and she does a lot of stuff with early childhood traumas and programming. And she said that 97% of our kind of instinctive thoughts are established during the first 7 years because we have no critical thinking skills. So when people completely dismiss your mysticism or your claircognizance or your gifts, you internalize that, and maybe that kind of influenced your atheism.
That's absolutely right. And not only it does that, obviously it decreases all, our potential to actually increase that power, let's say, or different gifts that we might have, but also we start creating certain memories, certain engrams that we start producing to survive. Okay, I don't want rejection, so I need to not to think in that way. I don't want to be criticized, then I don't need to think in that way. Because at the end of the day, what our brain is an experience machine, it's like an antenna. It's the antenna that is actually collecting information for all sources. But also it's an antenna that has multiple filters. Multiple filters, right? We don't really see reality. We just let's say,
our projection of reality.
Filter reality in many different ways, filter the frequencies, filter the information that is out there in many different ways. And the main situation that we start creating is to survive. So we just create the essentials to survive. And for us, when we're very small, then those essentials for survival is acceptance and complete love from our parents.
And fitting in as a tribal instinct.
Yes, exactly. Then it really not destroys, but it kind of dumps, it kind of decreases so many of the things that so many of the possibilities, and also stop us from actually our full evolution, because it might actually stop us from being courageous enough to explore different areas in life. And that's where the trauma comes, and a lot of illnesses come. So it's well known. There's something called attachment theory, right? That explains that. How actually poor attachment in early children actually creates anxiety, depression, or the impossibility to simply be successful. Being afraid of being. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like a good analogy for that is if you put a fish in a fish tank, it will grow to the size of the fish tank. Yeah. Or like a plant will only grow to the pot that you put it in because it doesn't have room to expand.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I actually was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs on Dr. Anna Elliott's podcast last Monday. And it's very much in the same essence. Like we have our basic primal needs, which is like food, family, shelter, all of those things. And when we don't actually, expand to our full potential, it's because we're coming from the third dimension, the material world, where we're acting from a place of ego. And to come into our self-actualization, where we become the full blossoming versions of ourselves, or the higher dimensional versions of ourselves, is when we actually kind of surpass all of that and come into our existence of truth.
Yep. That was well said.
Beautiful. All righty. Well, that was fun. Let's move on to neuroplasticity. I love this topic. It's one of the main things about yoga that I love so much, is just the journey of yoga. Really kind of inspires and supports neuroplasticity, which is the positive or negative, but we go for the positive, reprogramming of the brain through repetition and mindfulness. And you've spoken about this before. How do people begin to heal from trauma or chronic conditions by working with this?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to have the opportunity for insightfulness. Have the opportunity for insightfulness. So people need to have the opportunity for insightfulness.
Yes.
You know, and then that actually
self-reflection.
Yes, self-reflection, insightfulness. That means that the person needs to be free in, you know, like all those basic needs that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
You know, then yes, that's the first thing. Okay, when a person is always on survival mode, where because the society or the circumstances, okay, are not allowing that person to be to meet those needs, then it is very difficult. You are living always on the third dimensional state.
Always in survival mode.
Always in survival
mode. Your emotions, acting out of ego.
Yeah, and that means survival mode actually means at the biological level is always having high levels of cortisol, high levels of adrenaline and norepinephrine. Yes, in flight or fight mode. And what does that mean? That actually you are affecting every single one of your cells. Every single one of your cells, because, by the way, cortisol acts inside the nucleus of the cell at the genetic level. Okay, so basically, we don't know exactly how many changes it makes cortisol inside each one of our genes, and it will depend on the cell where it's being affected, right? Because each cell will actually receive different pieces of information depending on what they do. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that the first thing that we need to meet is our basic needs. Then allow us to be insightful, to self-reflect. Okay? Then that self-reflection sometimes comes when you actually go really down and say, there's no way that I can live in this way, right? Sometimes it's because you do have the opportunity, because you have the time, right? Because time is precious. And then after that, you start actually peeling off each one of those engrams, memories, attachments, creations of society, or self-creations, because you might have sometimes make association. For example, that poverty equals disharmony or violence, which is not true. Or even that poverty, but poverty might mean, you know, like going like higher possibility of violence. That's not necessarily true, and it depends on what is poverty. Let's talk about that. Well, what actually is the concept of poverty? Is it actually not having a house, not having a car, not having money in a bank? Or poverty is actually not being able to connect with others, with nature, not being able to be at peace, not being able to be, you know, to have your own food, maybe grow your own food, not like maybe depending on someone or a system is poverty, right? While, you know, our engrams say that poverty is the person that actually, monetary poverty, if they get less this amount of dollars a day, okay, or poverty if they don't have a land or a house, you know. So that, even those engrams, we need to start being insightful of what really is to be human, and what really is the human experience that we want to have, okay, and what is our purpose. And I think that our purpose is very similar, all of us. We want to have the best human experience and come back home to our essence, to join the source after having the most beautiful human experience possible. That's, I think, is our purpose. Everyone is going to have a different path. Everyone is going to have different experiences, and hopefully everyone is going to learn the lessons that they needed to learn during their during the trip here in this life.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because you know me, you know, like a lot of my history and the traumas and even experienced my own healing. And I completely agree that we see things through the lens of our own perspective and experiences, and that shapes our truth. It isn't necessarily the truth, or two truths can exist at the same time. I'm all about that. However, I also do think that even with like our basic needs, you know, aside from things obviously like air, but even with things like breath work, we can learn to adapt and expand our capacity and our potential through doing the work, through doing the healing. Like even with things like fasting, you don't become so dependent on food for energy. And when you do, and you create that purification and that alignment with your truth and stuff, you aren't as dependent on the things that nourish you in the physical world, because you're being more nourished by the metaphysical world, which is of a higher vibration, and it's a lighter density, because the third dimension is very dense, you know, it's all material. And I think that that is a really beautiful thing that a lot of people can't even really comprehend. Whoa, you're moving.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. What are your thoughts on that?
So I agree completely on that the basic needs of us, if we think about them, mm-hmm. the biological needs, mm-hmm. you know, like air, some degree of food, mm-hmm. connection. Yeah. But then let's talk about connection. That's what you're talking about. Connection mm-hmm. to others, connection to nature, yes. connection to your own spirituality. Mm-hmm. That is the need. Maybe shelter, but then the shelter are gonna be very variable depending on where you are in the world, exactly. depending on what you think is shelter for you. Okay, and at the end of the day,
adaptability is a basic primal need.
What was that?
Adaptability.
Adaptability. But I think our spirit machine, you know, our creator of the reality, not creator, let's say,
our processor,
our filter, our antenna, we actually is really good at adapting. Is excellent at adapting, mm-hmm. okay? So we will adapt, but we need to understand that it is about our engrams and our programming that actually make us want different things. Take us to a different situation. We need to start removing them little by little, understanding what the real needs of a human are, and that actually is part of the problem, that people is so close, so emboxed into their ideas of what they need. Yes, yeah. And when they reach there, like I did that. I thought, you know, because I was sold this idea that I needed to be successful, I needed to be the best doctor, and I sold my idea. of mm-hmm. being the best doctor possible and being successful. When I reached the goal that I wanted to reach, it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah. This
didn't give me the answer. Mm-hmm. I'm still feeling unfulfilled. Mm-hmm. You know, like then it comes to, you know, like okay, so let's start removing all the things that are not helpful for me to understand myself, mm-hmm. you know, and where they coming from. So basically, going back home. That's what I'm saying. So
to yourself.
Yes, to your truth, to yourself, mm-hmm. to the human experience you want to have, and collect all that info, and you're going back to the source with all that info. So that's basically the way that I see how the journey is. That's how I see it. Yeah. So I totally agree. But what I need to emphasize is that every single aspect in our life is a creation of our own. Mm-hmm. It's an engram of our own. Filter done in our filter, or filter from reality, for us to try to survive in the best way best way possible. And sometimes our environment, our society, wherever we are born, then actually start enslave us, make us slaves of those of certain ideas that our societies make as important for the society, not necessarily as important for you as a human, as human per se. So that's what I had to say about that.
Okay. Aho.
Aho.
Okay. So I wanted to touch a little bit on telomeres. We had a really interesting discussion one day, and I just thought it would be important to bring up, since we're talking about life and longevity and quality of life. Can you explain the role of telomeres and what they reveal about our cellular aging process?
Yeah, so telomeres basically are the one part of the DNA. Okay, sorry. Telomeres are one part of the DNA that they decrease in size as the cell divides. Okay? However, that was the initial part of the story. It also increases in size depending on the, let's say, amount of stress that we subject that cell. So if we subject those cells into a lot of stress, it shortens, and it makes it, when it reaches a critical size, it produces something called apoptosis of the cell, which is the apoptosis is the cell death program. Okay, then, however, it can also increase in size if instead of stress you give it calmness, other type of signals, relaxation. So the person that discovered the telomeres was Elizabeth Blackburn. Okay. Then, depending on the size of the telomere and other scientific evidence, our lifespan is 120 years. That's our lifespan. However,
is that the original lifespan, and then we can add on to it, or is that the maximum?
Well, biological, depending on the telomere size, if you actually living a good life, that is the expected lifespan.
A detox book that says if you live 120 years young, you die young.
Well, beyond that, I don't know, but that is the so far what biology says, right? There are all there. Like as I said, I will never actually stop from possibilities, because you never know. Rejuvenation through other type of healing. You never know what can happen in the future, right? Whether scientific future or metaphysical future or energetic future. Okay, there are many technologies or techniques can be used in the future that we are not using at this point that might span that lifespan. But what I'm trying to say is that in the modern world, we are actually saying that because we live 75, 80, 85 years, then we're having a good life. But I promise you, in my experience, we are actually living a life, 85, 90 years old, average, 85 years, okay, with at least 10 to 15 years that is an awful quality of life, of chronic illness, multiple medications, and all those things come from the amount of stress that the person is receiving. So the whole story of the telomere is that you can increase the size of the telomere depending on how you live your life, depending on everything that is in your environment. What does that mean? We're talking about diet. We're talking about
choices,
air.
totally tied to neuroplasticity too.
Yes.
By making constant positive changes and deciding daily to do the things.
The way that I see it, the saying is that everything is health. Mm-hmm. Health is the environment, society,
wealth,
news, your internal, your mindset, how you talk to yourself, mm-hmm. the idea that you believe, mm-hmm. your level of connectedness to everything, including source, mm-hmm. your diet, how you treat your temple.
Yes.
How you treat your temple, how you treat each one of yourselves, and understanding that everything that you do is changing you at a cellular level. That you're giving the environment to every single one of your cells, mm-hmm. to whether live longer or living shorter. So, as simple as that.
Yeah.
Every single thing. And it's your own responsibility.
Totally.
It's your own responsibility. There is no point of blaming anyone.
Mm-hmm. You know, I have centenarians on both sides of my family. Like I've got longevity on both sides, and then both of my parents died pretty young. You know, and it was due to lifestyle choices. And for me, I'm very healthy, as you know. I can actually attest that I am reverse aging. You know, I feel better, I look better, I'm completely healthy. And that's what, you know, the neuroplasticity is, the positive neuroplasticity and the positive lifestyle changes. Like you can actually reverse age. That is the beauty of understanding the effects of these telomeres.
Yes. And the telomere effect happens in every single cell, including your nerve cells. Okay. Yeah.
The
yes.
mind-body connection is so important, because if you're doing things that you think are healthy, like going to the gym and you absolutely hate it, you're actually torturing yourself.
Yes.
It's productive.
Yes.
To be in alignment.
Exactly.
In a state of joy, because you also learn better when you're
joyful action. Joyful action.
Yes. Playing is the best thing. For the win.
Yes.
Okay, so you've hinted at how emotional and spiritual healing can literally change our biology. What do you think that people don't realize about that connection? Now we just touched on anything, but is there anything else before we move on that you think is important to stress? Yeah,
I think that people had actually bought the idea that they don't need to be insightful, self-aware. They have bought the idea that they can get everything outside them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, and it's literally everything. You know, they think that they can get health from food,
a pill, or an operation,
from gym, from going to do sports, mm-hmm. from I don't know, from getting more money. Mm-hmm. From getting plastic surgeries or Botox injections or stuff like that.
It's actually a thing, like, you know, right now, because we're living in this material world, people think that health is looking healthy. But the appearance of being fit and stuff is all the side effects of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is the effect of a healthy lifestyle. Looking good is the effect of a healthy lifestyle. But also, what I'm trying to say is, but that is still a outside search. Mm-hmm. Real health comes from inside.
Okay. All right, we got to move on, just because we could talk forever on this.
Yes.
I wanted to really touch on a little bit of the ancestral wisdom. How do you integrate this ancestral teachings or any of this indigenous wisdom within your medical training today? And do you feel that there's ever a sort of conflict between it, being clinical and intuitive at the same time?
No, I don't think there is any contradiction. Yeah. Obviously I have my fears sometimes, right, of being outcast, and this is giving me the opportunity today. You're giving me the opportunity to speak my truth for the first time.
High five.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I never see myself as the doer. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I am through me. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I heal people through the most powerful thing that exists, the word.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, yes, they come to me for the pill.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, they come to me for the word.
Mm-hmm.
The word that they need. The sentences that they need. Okay? So I don't do it. I just channel, let's say, although I don't like to say channeling because it's not really channeling.
Mm-hmm.
It comes through me. Okay? And it comes from outside me. And it just allow it. I just allow it. And I know that I had always allowed it. And that's the reason why now I can say it openly. I just had always allowed it. That is my ancestral. That is my ancestral way of being.
Mm-hmm.
I just allow my ancestral being to be. And I use the word to heal. Yes, I have a bunch of knowledge that I acquired through my life, but at the end of the day, what each person needs, yes, I have it here and I use it, and then I do the pill, I do the diagnosis, I diagnose, and I do my tests and I'll do everything, but it's through the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't consider myself a teacher either. Okay? I don't consider myself a teacher either. I consider myself a person that is here allowing itself to use words to heal someone else.
Yeah. So basically people come to you looking for medication and you prescribe them meditation.
I prescribe them medication, meditation, insightfulness, and I prescribe them.
I have bragging rights. I introduced him to meditation.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
Okay.
All
right.
You were the first person that told me about the chakra system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like looking at you. Well, I was actually preparing my royal.
A lot of things I told you that you looked at me like I was crazy, but it didn't stop me.
But that's fine. That's fine. Like I apologize for that if that's still in your mind or no. Okay. Yeah, but I have to thank you for all that. But at the same time, as I said, there is no point in which a human actually can say, well, this is the point when I started learning. No, we're just learning. We're learning. We're just collecting that info, okay? And we're just going to the path and trying to actually become or having the best human experience, having the best information collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the journey is the destination. Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit about like your neuroscience and neurological disorders. Have you ever seen any cases where spiritual awakenings, perhaps, or mystical states were misdiagnosed as neurological disorders?
That's a great question, and I honestly. Only one time I told someone that sounds like a spiritual crisis, let's call it, because it didn't fit into anything. And then we have a very long conversation with that person. And then I did prescribe, and it just came through me again, from wherever it went, from source, let's say, from source, and then that I needed to tell her that. And she received it very openly, very beautifully.
Refreshing, actually.
And then she went her way and she's happy. She's very happy. She comes to visit from time to time, but to tell me how things are going. But that's the only time. I do actually see a lot of people with neurological conditions, with epilepsy, with psychogenic non-epileptic seizure, which is actually a way how trauma actually expresses into neurological symptoms, which look like seizure, but in reality is from psychological trauma. Sometimes not even actually with people diagnosed with depression or anxiety. You don't need to be diagnosed. You just need to be suppressing significant amount of trauma and never dealing with it, and that can actually lead to your nervous system to act in certain ways that we're understanding more and more in modern times. But in the past, in the recent time, we were just dismissing, or not actually giving it any importance. Now, from those people, maybe some of them might be a spiritual crisis, what actually have been called in the past spiritual crisis. But I because there is for sure a trauma link. Okay, there's for sure a trauma link at that point, and they are having symptoms that are actually affecting them. Then I cannot go there. I had to first deal with the symptoms that are affecting their quality of life. Okay, so maybe in the future I will be able to tell some of them that maybe that's what's going on with them. But at this point, if they're being affected by symptoms, that's what I deal with, because they are affected in their quality of life, and it's not in the best interest for me to go deeper than that. So even this part is very important to go layer by layer. The same thing with the epilepsy. The person with epilepsy has epilepsy, which is basically a brain condition in which the brain networks get hyperactive and lead to a variety of symptoms, from convulsive seizures to loss of awareness and stuttering spells to all sort of sensory symptoms, or even emotional symptoms or autonomy symptoms. And they have certain features like being brief, being multiple, becoming more frequent over time, and having no, let's say, nothing in between them. So a person comes back to their baseline in between them. So these people those networks are not working well. Okay, The first layer is to treat those networks and stop them from actually doing that. But then the next layer are why those networks are hyperactive, and it all comes to the same issue. People are holding traumas that are making their brain networks hyperactive. People are holding stress that are making those brain networks hyperactive. People are holding bad habits, bad diet, not sleeping well, fighting with themselves in their own mind. And that is actually making these networks that are organically ill, hyperactive.
Dis-ease.
Exactly. So then the same thing, I apply the same thing. I give the medication, I do the diagnosis, I give the medication, but then I start building all the other parts that actually are required for the person to, on their own wisdom that they have, start finding their ways to actually live a very human experience. That's how I integrate my neurology, my neuroscience, my epilepsy practice with my let's say ancestral wisdom and ancestral teachings, and I just allow them as well for them to actually find their own conclusions. And it works marvelous. I love it. So it doesn't fight at all with science.
Okay, so thank you. Before we finish off today, what's one piece of wisdom, either from you or your ancestors or your journey, that you hope more people come to understand as a final thought?
I hope that people. I hope that this talk today help us to connect horizontally as humans and to connect vertically with source.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would love this talk to give.
Mm-hmm.
That they can make their own connection with themselves, with source, and with other humans. We are by no means, like disconnected. We are not separated, neither scientifically, nor spiritually, not in any way. You can look it up. We're all connected. Science and everything says the same.
Yeah.
So we just need to own it. We just need to act on it. And we just need to do the best of ourselves to become the best version of each one of us, the most loving, the most compassionate version of each one of us, the most understanding version of each one of us. And in that way, we change the world.
Aho.
Uh-huh.
Carlos, thank you so much for your presence, your heart, your wisdom, and your living devotion to healing in all its dimensions. Your story is a bridge between worlds, and your voice is medicine. So thank you to you for tuning in. If this conversation sparked something in you, or if it opened your heart or activated your mind in any sense, I invite you to dive deeper into Dr. Carlos's work. You can follow him on, what is it, Epilepsy Doctor?
Yeah. Well, I don't have any website. Yeah, you can follow my Instagram. Yes, Epilepsy Doctor. I don't even remember. Look for me, Dr.
I'll
Carlos
put it in the
Florez.
description in below. And you can stay tuned for his upcoming work and his sharings on blending brain, science, and soul. And if this episode moved you, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and follow me, the Chakra Goddess, on Instagram and TikTok for more conscious content, sacred interviews, and the full spectrum of nourishment for your mind, body, and soul. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep feeding your chakras. Peace, love, and luminous blessings. Aho.
Aho.
Mwah.